Welcome everybody back to Chazin-the-Dream. I'm Ethan Chazin, a New York business-based growth coach, and I am beyond thrilled today to share with you all our guest, Kristof Gleich. So let me just give a very broad overview of Kristof's stellar career, and then we're going to dive right in with a conversation. So Kristof, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am ready to rock and roll, Ethan.
Brilliant. So, ladies and gentlemen, for your edification, Kristof Gleich is the president and CIO of Harbor Capital Advisors. He oversees all of Harbor's investment, distribution, marketing, and executive office functions at Harbor. He provides insight while helping lead Harbor's strategic growth plan outside of work. Kristof has shared that he's kept busy running around after his three sons. Prior to joining Harbor, Kristof was a managing director and global head of manager selection at JP Morgan Chase and Company. He received his BS in physics from the University of Bristol. He's a CFA charter holder and is a FINRA Series 7 and 63 licensed professional. And ladies and gentlemen, join me please in welcoming Kristof to Chazin-the-Dream. Kristof, it is such an honor to have you on the program today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. And just to pick up on something you said, my wife's been away for the last 6 days. She's coming back tonight at midnight from Athens in Greece. So I've really been chasing around after my three boys. So if I look a bit tired, I am knackered because I've just spent the last 5 or 6 days chasing around with my boys, which has been a lot of fun.
I have to ask you, since I have no boys, I have a
Yeah.
26-year-old emotionally challenging daughter.
Yeah.
How old are the little men?
So my eldest is 13 and my twins are 9. So they're a great age, and my twins especially very high energy. And I have a new appreciation for my wife. I've been married. We got married 15 years ago. It was actually our wedding anniversary, the day that she left to go to Greece with her best friend. But anyway, so but I do have a newfound appreciation for how she positively impacts all of our lives, is how I'll say it.
So if you don't say it often enough,
Yeah,
we can definitely share with her the recording.
there you go. Exactly.
So you've made it public knowledge. Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because I've had some other folks on the program who have talked about what Harbor Capital Advisors is doing with your funds that are comprised of companies who take it upon themselves to build amazing workplace cultures. And I was really interested today to have your perspective on a number of concepts, ideas, or frameworks. So the first is we talked about HAPI, an ETF comprised of companies who have built and continuously struggled to build amazing workplace culture. Can you talk a little bit about HAPI just passing an important milestone? We talked about it passing the 3-year threshold and what that means.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back. So I've worked in financial services. I'm from the UK. I live in Chicago. That's where I am today. And I moved to the US about 10 years ago, New York, and then sort of now Chicago. So I've had about a 25-year career in financial services, and I've worked for, been fortunate to work for some prestigious leading firms in that time. And what we do at Harbor Capital, and I provide this as context rather than a commercial, we work with clients, financial advisors, wealth advisors, retirement advisors across the country. And we try and offer them solutions that generate strong risk-adjusted returns. So as an investor, you can go and invest passively in the market. That's buying a very low cost, ETF or index fund that tracks the index. Or you can do what's sort of called active management, which is where you try and take a different approach to what's in the market to generate stronger returns. And that's kind of what we do as an organization. And the way that we achieve that is we try and find interesting, what we would describe as best-in-class boutique specialists that we think can do that very, very well. So, and then we partner with them to launch, in this case, like an ETF. And so the ETFs that you mentioned are are really unique because it's trying to tie together the link between culture, corporate culture, workplace engagement, and human capital. And if you do right by your people, you will deliver better outcomes for your business. You'll grow better, you'll have better products, you'll have better services, you'll have a better brand. And ultimately, for, if you like, the CEO, the CFO, or the shareholder of that business, or the owner of that business, they will benefit because the businesses that do right by their people outperform businesses that don't, which is kind of amazing, right? It's if you hear every business leader in the world, they will say some version of the following: our number one asset is what? Our people, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I've spent 25 years. I'm sure all of your listeners or viewers can be sympathetic with this as well. It's like, at the end of the day, when you boil down, like, what is a business? It's a legal entity that's comprised of people, and it's comprised of people working together, trying to achieve something together, trying to create things together. So the more that you can invest in those people, look after those people, value those people, make them feel like they're part of something, give them ownership, give them creativity, give them runway and room to excel, that should translate into better business performance. Otherwise, like, what's it all for? And we think we have this ETF, the ticker is HAPI for like happy. It's a little, play on words there. We think we have a unique ETF that takes basically a big data approach. It looks at all of like the publicly traded companies and tries to measure what we describe as the human capital factor, and tries to rank the businesses that score best on engagement, employee engagement, and then only invests in those businesses that score really highly on employee engagement.
Hey, Kristof,
Yeah.
can I jump in? I'm really fascinated, and I shared this with you and your team about Harbor Capital's approach, which is to take a tremendous amount of data, to quantify the measurement of the human capital. Can you walk through a little bit about, at a high enough level, the approach that you take to take something that you said intuitively is pretty obvious,
Yeah.
right? You treat your people better, you create a better workplace, they'll perform and produce at a higher level, and mathematically, profitability should rise. But how do you actually aggregate the data? Because when I was talking to folks on your team about it, that to me sounds like the amazing part of the Wizard of Oz that you all do behind the curtain.
So yeah, so it's very scientific. It's very empirical, right? And so the first thing I would say is we've partnered with a firm called Irrational Capital, and they are experts in behavioral science in the workplace. And so my job in a way is easy. It's trying to find the people with the expertise. Think of me as almost like a talent scout, where I'm going around and looking. And in this case, the talent that we landed on was a firm called Irrational Capital, and it was co-founded by a guy called David Van Aldersberg and a very famous behavioral scientist, Dan Ariely, who I'm sure your viewers and listeners will be familiar with. He's written a number of New York Times best-selling books, and he is the head of behavioral economics at Duke University, a very prestigious university, obviously here in the US. And he has become, and they have become, sort of experts in what motivates people in the workplace and what doesn't motivate people in the workplace, and how you test this to see the effect of different factors that really do motivate people or not. And so they've done an incredible amount of research on this, a decade plus of data collection on this specifically, this human capital factor. And let me sort of unpack how it works. So there are, I'm sure that you've done these in your own sort of corporate lifetime. I certainly have in mine. There are these employee surveys that you fill out, and that some firms are pretty disciplined at doing these every single year. And these employee surveys ask you a series of questions every single year, and the questions can range from things around compensation to things around engagement to a sense of fairness to a sense of opportunity to allude at a culture of innovation and things like that. And I'll kind of go into that to the more specifics. But then those surveys are, if you have the data and you can collect the data on an anonymized basis, they're a treasure trove of information around trying to figure out which companies have happy employees, which companies don't have happy employees, which companies are trending in certain ways, positively or negatively, and you effectively collect all of that data. So the starting point for data collection for these ETFs and for us as a firm is collecting over 700 million different data points, which are thousands, hundreds of thousands of different surveys from thousands upon thousands of different companies, and then trying to aggregate all of that data. And then, statistically, you sort of normalize it, which means you can compare it and compare kind of apples for apples across different businesses in different industries over time to see what those employees think about those companies. And then effectively what we do, and I can get into some more specifics to bring it to life, but effectively what we then do is you rank those businesses depending upon that data collection every year, and then you just cut off the best businesses. So for the ETF HAPI, HAPI, it's taking those top 150 businesses. So I'm sure your readers are familiar, your listeners are familiar with the S&P 500, that's 500 companies. There's something called the Russell 3000, that's about 3,000 companies. And what we're trying to do is isolate those best-in-class firms that invest in their people better than their competitors do. So the natural question is sort of normally like, well, what do you look at? What do you look for?
Right. That's what I wanted to ask. Absolutely.
So I'll go through. So there's sort of all of the questions that are asked, we map those questions to different factors or categories to try and make sense of it. And there's sort of 7 of those categories. So we take all of these questions, we map each question to sort of a one of 7 categories, think of them as pillars, and then we score each company on each one of those pillars, and then we rank the companies. So what does that mean? Well, one of the pillars, I'll list out the pillars very quickly, and then I'll give a couple of examples and do it.
Please.
So there's 6 intrinsic factors and 1 extrinsic. So the 6 intrinsic ones are, and I'll just run through them: organizational effectiveness, innovation, direct management, organizational alignment, engagement, emotional connection, and then the extrinsic one I mentioned are just benefits, extrinsic rewards, compensation, healthcare, things like that. So those are the 7, and we map each question to one of those 7, and then try and score each of the 7, and then collectively the aggregate. So let me give maybe some examples around one of them. I'll pick a couple, like innovation. So I believe as a business leader, and I've lived and breathed this my entire working life, innovation and having a culture of innovation is critical for success. The only constant is change. And whatever business, whatever industry we're in, the world is constantly changing. Technology is changing. Research is constantly driving new insights. Consumer habits and preferences are constantly changing. And so if you look at any world-class company, what they've done over time is demonstrated innovation to stay ahead and to stay relevant. If you don't innovate, if you don't change, you're going backwards. And so some companies embrace innovation, others don't. And the best people to ask, or the best way, I'm sorry, to learn about whether a company is innovative, ask the people that work there. Ask the people that have worked there for like 10 years. Ask the people that have worked there for 3 years. Compare how they are answering on things like innovation. And so some of the questions is, do rank 1 to 5, 5 being strongly agree, 1 being strongly disagree. Does your company foster an innovative work environment? That's a very explicit way of asking it, and you can mark 4 or 5 or 1 or 2. And then there'll be other more sort of subtly nuanced questions like, new ideas and new ways of thinking are openly encouraged
Uh-huh.
at my company. Again, strongly agree, 4 or 5. So think about like different versions of innovation, different ways of kind of teasing that out explicitly or implicitly, and then aggregating all of those. And then for thousands of companies, you can then see think of it as a sort of an X-ray into the company, or an MRI scan into the company. This is what employees think about innovation. And I just think that's so interesting to be able to sort of collect this data and look and score these businesses. Other ones that are really, really important as well. Emotional connection. This is one that we struggle with here at Harbour Capital. I think it's one that we all struggle with, is creating an emotional connection between what you're trying to do as a firm and what you're asking your people to do each and every day. We in financial services, we have diverse different departments. We have marketing departments, accounting departments, operations departments, investing, sales and distribution, and project management. How do you empower everybody? How do you get everybody to feel that they're part of a collective? And the more that businesses can create that emotional connection between their sort of purpose and what they're doing, or their mission and what they're doing, and I don't necessarily mean sort of an ESG type mission. I just mean like, why do I exist? Why do I come in every day? Like, what are we trying to do? Like, who are we competing with? Like, what does winning mean? What's giving me a sort of a sense of purpose to do more? If the more that businesses can unlock that, the better. Now, I've got a question for you. In your old world, in your old, pre-2009 corporate world, in the first half of your corporate career, if I were to ask you, like, what % less effort could you put into your job before being fired? What would the answer be? Like, so if you think today you work at like 100, or, back in the corporate world, how much less effort do you think you could put in before you would get found out as being underperforming and then be let go? And, without putting you on the spot, like, I ask this question all the time, and the answer I always get this sort of shocked expression of like, why are you asking this? It's like, and I ask this for journalists, when journalists like interview me, and, they will say, well, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 70%. I'm like, wow. I was like, you could put in 70% less effort than you do today, but collect your paycheck, get paid the same. Like, why don't you do that? Why don't you just work less and get paid the same? And the reason is because these people that like their jobs, they're passionate about it. They're driven by something other than just clipping their paycheck. And so people don't work every day to sort of optimize on like, well, you're paying me this and therefore I'm only going to give you this. If you create an environment that they love working in, they're going to pay that back to the company by just putting more back into the company as well. And so again, the more that you can do that, um, the better. So sorry, I know it was a long answer, but hopefully I touched upon a number of concepts there.
No, it's genius the way you frame that, especially the notion of asking people who are already intrinsically motivated
Yeah.
how much less could you put into work and still retain employment? And the number is startling. But I would almost flip that, dare I might, Kristof, and say how many people have already now emotionally checked out, silent quitting, and doing the bare minimum, still garnering a paycheck, but because the culture is toxic, because there's no engagement,
Yeah.
because there's no emotional connection to the goals of the team and the organization, they've checked out. So now if you have 100,000 employees, let's say Bayer, and they're all doing 25 to 50% less, think about the hit from a performance and productivity standpoint. So here's my question, because I actually did have a question that you eloquently just literally framed it.
Hmm.
So genius is so HAPI has surpassed the three-year
Yeah.
mark, and you were talking about the composition of the fund, where you take the top 150 and cut off on those seven functional aspects of a high-performing organization, and you rate
Hmm.
them. So how has HAPI performed relative to, let's say, an S&P or a Russell? And just talk about what those findings quantifiably say about the connection between, as you framed it, um, culture, workplace engagement, and valuing human capital.
So the thank you. So look, it's done very well. So um, since we incepted, so just over 3 years ago, the index, like the S&P 500, which is kind of like the industry index, it's the market, that's done very well. It's up 25% a year. But the HAPI ETF is up 27.5% a year. So it's outperformed by 2.5 percentage points per year. And when you take 2.5 percentage points per year and you compound that over the longer term, that translates into a big difference in terms of net worth at the end of your investment time horizon. Um, and so when we look at it how it does versus the market, but we look at it how it does versus the competition. And when you look at how it's done versus the competition, it's inside the top sort of 10%. So again, it's a very good outcome. If you took 100 managers, professional money managers trying to outperform the S&P 500, we would rank about number 7 or 8 out of those 100, and we've added 250 basis points or 2.5% per year over and above the benchmark. What I would say is investing in sort of US large cap equities is one of the most, if probably the most efficient part of the market in the world. And it's really hard to outperform at all in this part of the market. And in order to outperform the market, you have to have some form of edge, investment edge that the others don't have. And edge can come in different forms. It can come in skill, it can come in data, it can come in knowledge or information. But because the world is, there's so much data in the world now, it's really hard to try and find an edge. And we believe that we have an edge driven by this marriage of behavioral science and unstructured data, taking 700 million different data points, having this survey, this treasure trove of data around what people are feeling. Like, it's very difficult to empirically measure feelings, yet feelings and emotions are really important when it comes to measuring the workplace. And by marrying that all together, we're able to evaluate a business differently from anybody else, because and nobody else has that. And so the way I sort of think about this is people are the number one asset of a business. But when you look at traditional investing, people are not recorded as an asset on a balance sheet. So
Yeah.
if a business invests in a factory, it gets recorded on its balance sheet as an asset. If another business takes that same investment and instead of building a factory, it invests that same money into skills development, into improving the culture of its people, so it makes that investment in its people, that is considered a cost. It's not reflected on the balance sheet as an asset. And so that's what I think is really interesting is there's actually an accounting inefficiency here because it's really hard to measure and account for those investments in people. And so accounting standards are pretty lazy. They're just like, it just goes as a cost. And everyone puts it as a cost. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So in a way, the data that we're using is trying to sort of correct for this accounting anomaly. And if you can, then you should be able to outperform because you're able to see a hidden asset that you can see that others can't see. And that's why I love geeking out on this and getting so excited by it because it's very creative. We have an edge. It's a part of the market that's really difficult to outperform. And what I do love about this as well is it was personally for me a marriage of my professional career and leadership career of like I've always been a positive leader. I've always believed that you should use more carrot than stick, to lead, like incentivize people, give people room to run, trust people. And just to see evidence of those things really mattering, to then actually being able to take those leadership concepts and use them so that people can you know, earn a better rate of return for their retirement. It's just a great thing.
I cannot understate the power of what you said in terms of your 25 years in leadership roles in financial services and the aggregate takeaway of the marriage of the data collection, 700 million data points, but also from a behavioral science perspective, marrying that to inside an organization, what your people are telling you they feel,
Yes.
so that you're giving the computational power of a multiple of 1 and 1 is 3, where you've got this data now that says we've had 3 years of outperforming the standard benchmarks because those top organizations have proven the path in investing in people. I'm always fascinated when I hear people talking about employees. It's cost, it's payroll, it's our people are our largest cost. I never hear organizations talking about the power of investing in people, and when they do, they give it lip service, and it's marketing spin for recruiting purposes. But
Absolutely.
now somebody could take your data in your fund and say we have 3 years of data aggregation with also surveying employees that says these are the top performing companies who do it and do it really well. And I guess my question behind all that is, what is it about your background? What is it about what you noticed throughout your career? Just if you could share some advice and counsel with people who are challenged to create these powerful workplace cultures, to have their companies achieve the financial performance behind the human capital, how would you advise them based on your experience?
Yeah, I think so. There's obviously a few things that you need to do. I think but for communication is super important in the workplace, and I'm a big proponent of over communicating, so that everybody understands as much as they possibly can what's going on inside an organization. And so I think I think over communicating, and I know some people on my team probably get sick of me saying this, but I think there is no such thing as over communication, and I don't think businesses do that enough. And I think businesses and leaders often feel like once they've said something once, twice, or 3 times that people have got it. And they don't, because people are busy. and people are focused on different things, and you just have to keep, communicate and keep reinforcing key messages, keep reinforcing key initiatives, keep reinforcing key cultural tenets that you're trying to build as a firm. So that's definitely the first thing. Reinforcing behaviors that you want to see, celebrating joyously if people are showing the behaviors that you're trying to engender and install in an organization. When you see small micro examples of that, you need to openly and wildly celebrate them to create that sort of positive reinforcement that these are the types of behaviors that you want to see. So if you've joined a company, or you've taken over a company, or you're working in a company where it isn't very innovative and you're struggling for like new ideas, you need to tell everybody that you want to create a culture of innovation. But that's not enough. But by the way, you need to tell them, you need to say that 1,000 times. You need to say it in every one-on-one, every all-employee meeting, every leadership meeting, to the point where you're like, did I say this 10 seconds ago or like an hour ago? I can't remember. I'm just going to say it again in case it wasn't 10 seconds ago. And then once you've done that, you've got almost like the foundation of like, right, you're beginning to set expectations for innovation. And then if someone comes with an idea that demonstrates innovation as a behavior, even if you think it's a terrible idea, whatever this person or group of people are bringing you, you wildly celebrate that idea for the idea because it's demonstrating innovation. And then hopefully that gets people that may be less confident about coming forward with an idea to see this positive reinforcement. And then they come forward, and then someone else comes forward, and you start to get sort of almost like a compounding or a network effect of innovation. And again, like you have to be very intentional and disciplined and do this over a number of years. It's not something that, and I learned this myself, it's very easy for things to lose momentum, and you've got to keep nurturing. It's like a garden. Like when you plant something like a new sapling, you have to keep, watering it and nurturing it and tending to it. And so you, again, just being sort of very intentional. So like communication, like establishing what you want, reinforcing the culture that you're trying to achieve. And also the flip side of that is if you have people that are running against the grain of what you want as an organization, especially when it comes to points of principle or culture, you have to deal with those people, and you have to make the right tough decisions around those people as a way of reinforcing for people that are demonstrating the types of behaviors and the culture and the skills that you want. But again, it's never ending. It's a continuous process, and it's one that you always have to be humble enough to realize you don't have all the answers. You're going to be on your own journey of discovery. But those would be a sort of a few things that would come to mind. Just a couple of others. Just being positive, being a positive person. I always find I'm a pretty open person. I don't know why. Like psychologically, I guess you had it at the beginning, like talking about my kids and stuff. I like there to be one version of me at work and the same version of me at home. I tried in my earlier career to kind of have a work version of me and a social version of me, and you're living a bit of a lie when you do that.
Ah,
And
ah.
we try and sort of create, be your true self. And we want a collection of eclectic, idiosyncratic, quirky, different people, and that's what makes a great team. But the common thread is we want everybody to feel themselves, and I try and live that every day. And for me, that means overly communicating, wearing my heart on my sleeve, and sort of providing that, if you like, sort of predictability and transparency to people.
I'm so struggling with how to articulate a summarization of that, but I'm just going to bastardize it anyway
Go
and,
for it.
trying to ask you for your permission. Um,
Sure.
what I'm hearing is the totality of a concept of you cannot measure the financial performance, that's a lagging indicator that follows a culture re-architecture that hits on what you said are the core tenets, which is over communicate to reinforce the messaging, the initiatives, and the culture values. The second you talked about was embracing and reinforcing behavior, celebrate positive behaviors, encourage people, nurture the momentum of this culture transformation. You also talked about something which I found really fascinating is individual leader and also organizational authenticity, and to advocate for it, that the transparency of these are our values, this is where we're going. If you share our values, that's great. If you don't, we have a problem, especially if you're in a leadership role.
Yeah.
I'm really hearing how your fund is the proof positive that the top 150 top financial performing organizations have gotten there because of their embrace of a new 21st century human capital dynamic, where efficiency, manufacturing, trade war, supply chain, all of that comes, it's important, but I'm hearing you say the power of the people is proof positive in the HAPI Fund.
I think that is very well said. Thank you, Ethan.
I'm trying to articulate this notion of the marriage of a massive data analysis that you go through and that you partnering with Irrational Capital on that behalf, but also the seven pillars.
Yeah.
Because I cannot tell you, Kristof, time and time and time again, founders, CEOs, leaders will say, I know that culture is important, or we value our people, or we have a great place to work. And I will say, really? How do you know?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, we did a survey once several years ago, and the average score on a 1 to 5 was a 3.4.
Yeah.
And
No, it's
this
hard.
is proof positive, what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And I'm almost speechless.
Oh, I love it. It's great. And it is. It's the proof of what we've all been, well, in a way, what we've all known or hoped to be true deep down. This is a great proof point for if there are skeptics or cynics out there that look at things through a financial only lens, actually show them this and be like, look, you're financially oriented. Here are the financial outcomes that it drives. This is how you get there. And if we can grow this, if we can create a movement, hopefully it positively impacts workplaces, across the country. And when more and more people become aware of the positive financial impacts of doing this, there's almost then like a shareholder fiduciary obligation to incorporate culture and people investment and engagement to deliver shareholder returns. And if we can play a small part in making corporate America a more engaging and better place to work and more enjoyable, and you get fulfill more of your potential, then that's a great thing to play a part of.
And to that point, because I want to be sensitive to your time, because I so much value you coming on the show today, but this notion of growing the movement with Harbor Capital Advisors. So what do you want to see for Harbor Capital Advisors moving forward? Like, how do you picture you're playing a central role in the movement?
Yeah, so look, for us, it's we're an investment firm, and for us, it's going to be promoting and creating awareness of the ETF. So, like, this conversation's been great. This is a great example. On our friends at Irrational Capital, David Van Aldersberg, the co-founder, this is his lifetime's passion. His business partner, Bart Houlihan, who I believe you've had on the show before as well. What an amazing guy. And then obviously Dan Ariely, who was the co-founder as well, is just the global leading thinker in this space. get in touch with them. They'd love to hear if what I've said today in any way sort of tickles any curiosity that people may have. You know, go look up Irrational Capital, maybe on the notes or something. We can create a link to their website and David's email address. They love partnering with businesses. They love helping. They love talking about what they do. They love really going into what the data shows them. They can help businesses target real specific actions that a business can take. You know, if you work on these 3 things over the next 12 or 18 months, you will get a demonstrable improvement in engagement, which will translate into better performance. So there's really, if anybody is listening and is curious about like unlocking the potential of people as a true asset, Irrational Capital is, in my mind, the leading firm to help you do that.
For sure. And I've spoken to David about the prospect of him coming on the program.
Oh,
He
very
was
good.
definitely receptive to that. I will definitely, in the description below of the video, is to put their contact details. But Kristof, if somebody heard what you had to say today and said, you know what, I want to go right to the horse's mouth. I want to go to the source. What would be the best way as we kind of put a Tiffany bow on today's conversation, how they might reach out to you and or your team to explore these HAPI funds?
So our website's a good place to start, harborcapitaladvisors.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So, you know, just look me up. I think there's only one Kristof Gleich with my spelling in the world.
There
So
is.
there is. Function of my background and where I'm from, I suppose. But yeah, if you look me up on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn. Happy to help. Also, my email address is kristof.gleich@harborcapital.com.
And Kristof, I will definitely put all of your contact details
Thank
below
you.
as well for folks who are looking to start a conversation about growing a movement. And I'd be remiss if I just didn't say as we wrap things up today, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on Chazin-the-Dream. And thank you so much for sharing your passion and your career and the work you're doing at Harbor Capital Advisors. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, Ethan. Thank you so much. That was a fun conversation.
Thank you as well. Feel the same way. Thank you, Kristof.